Javikir Sindarov has been absolutely dominant, sitting a full point and a half ahead of the field heading into round behind him. Fabiano Caruana is the closest challenger, with Anish, Giri and Praggnanandhaa locked together a full point further back. For either of those two to stay in contention, today is a must-win situation. We have 3 games on the board, and one of them promises to be a battle between 2 of the sharpest tacticians in the world. Anish Giri is one of the most technically refined players in the world, famous for his near-flawless defensive technique and deep preparation. Praggnanandhaa burst onto the scene as a teenage prodigy and has developed into a fearless, dynamic fighter. Both players enter this game sitting at 5 points and desperately need a win to stay within striking distance of the runaway leader. The Queen's Gambit, accepted, is one of the oldest and most respected responses to d4. Favored at the highest level by players from Boris Spassky to Magnus Carlsen, Black accepts the Gambit pawn and must solve the problem of how to hold it or achieve useful counterplay. The resulting positions often feature dynamic pawn structures and an early fight for the center. Giri opens with d4, staking an immediate claim to the center and signaling his intention to fight for a structural advantage from the very first move. Knight to f6 is a flexible response, developing a piece while keeping options open for the Queen's Gambit, the Nimzo-Indian, or the King's Indian. It is the most popular reply to d4 at the top level. c4 follows naturally, reinforcing White's central presence and posing the classic Queen's Gambit question. The board is beginning to take shape. e6 is a solid, classical response, preparing to support d5 and keeping the center stable. Black commits to a Queen's Gambit-style setup. Knight to f3 develops naturally toward the center, adding pressure to d4 and preparing to support a future e4 push, a principled developing move, and d5 stakes Black's own central claim, entering the classical Queen's Gambit proper. The position is now completely symmetrical and brimming with tension. The knight comes to c3, developing with tempo and increasing the pressure on d5. White is following the most direct classical development. Capturing on c4 is the defining move of the Queen's Gambit, accepted. Black grabs the pawn and invites White to spend tempos recovering it, hoping to use that time to free the position. Rather than immediately recapturing, Giri strikes in the center with e4, seizing space and setting up an aggressive pawn structure. This is the energetic Furman variation, named after Karpov's legendary trainer. b5 tries to defend the extra pawn on c4 by supporting it from the queenside. This is a sharp and risky commitment, creating immediate queenside tension. Giri pushes e5, gaining space and immediately attacking the knight on f6. White is playing for the initiative rather than simply recovering material. The knight retreats to d5, finding a strong centralized square where it cannot be immediately attacked. Black starts to consolidate. Giri snaps off the b5 pawn, winning material and simultaneously threatening the c7 pawn. White has restored material balance while keeping the initiative. The knight retreats to b6, moving away from the center but keeping pressure on the d5 square. Black must find active counterplay quickly. Bishop to e2 is a quiet but effective developing move, preparing to castle and keeping the structure solid. Giri is not rushing but building methodically. Bishop to e7 prepares to castle as well. Both sides are mobilizing their kingside pieces before committing to any further structural changes. Giri castles, tucking the king to safety and connecting the rooks. White's kingside development is complete and the position is ready for more concrete action. Praggnanandhaa follows suit with castling. Both kings are now safe, and the game is about to enter a deeply strategic phase centered on the extra pawn on c4. a4 is an aggressive queenside advance from Giri, immediately challenging Black's grip on c4 and threatening to dislodge the bishop or knight supporting it. Bishop to i6 is an active response, immediately trading off White's light-squared bishop and trying to reduce White's attacking potential. The bishop finds a useful diagonal here. The knight retreats to i3, targeting the c4 pawn and preparing to recapture it. An odd-looking square for the knight, but fully justified by the pawn hunt. Black advances c5, counterattacking in the center and trying to open lines before White can consolidate. The position is becoming very complex. Giri pushes i5, gaining space on the queenside and restricting the b6 knight. The a-pawn becomes a serious long-term asset. The knight jumps back to the powerful d5 outpost, recentralizing and eyeing key squares throughout the board. Giri finally recaptures the pawn on c4, having spent several moves maneuvering to do so efficiently. White now has full material equality with an active bishop. Praggnanandhaa captures on I5, winning back a pawn and bringing the queen to an active post. However, this is flagged as a mistake by the engine, and it is not hard to see why. The queen ventures to a somewhat exposed square, while white has active pieces ready to exploit it. Knight to c2 is a precise move, immediately harassing the queen on I5 and preparing to reroute the knight toward the center. White begins generating threats efficiently. The queen retreats to b6, looking for safety while maintaining some pressure, but this too is judged as a mistake. The queen has lost valuable time dancing around the board, and white's initiative is growing steadily. Giri trades the bishop for the powerful knight on d5, eliminating black's best centralized piece and opening the position in white's favor. Recapturing with the e-pawn is another inaccuracy. The engine shows this gives white additional structural advantages, and now the e5 pawn becomes a proud advanced post. The rook swings to e1, lining up behind the powerful e5 pawn and increasing pressure in the center. White's pieces are coordinating beautifully. Bishop to b7 attempts to activate the long dormant bishop. However, this too is considered a mistake, as black continues to fall slightly further behind in development and coordination. Giri brings the bishop to g5, pinning the e7 bishop and adding pressure to the position. White continues to find active, purposeful moves. Praggnanandhaa trades off the bishop to relieve the pin, a practical decision to simplify the position. The knight recaptures on g5, eyeing the h7 square and keeping some kingside pressure. White maintains a slight but persistent edge. h6 drives the knight away from its threatening post, a necessary defensive move. Though it slightly weakens the kingside pawn cover. Giri captures on c5, opening the position further and creating a passed pawn structure. The game is simplifying slightly, but white retains the better structure. The queen recaptures on c5, centralizing and keeping some activity. Black is holding on, but the position remains uncomfortable. The knight retreats to f3, a flexible square from which it can support the center or transfer elsewhere. White maintains a clean position. Knight to c6 develops the last remaining piece, finally bringing some coordination to black's forces. The position is tense, but still fighting. Giri centralizes the knight on the powerful d4 outpost, from where it dominates the board and supports the e5 pawn, a model centralization. Praggnanandhaa exchanges the knight on d4, trying to reduce white's control of the center by eliminating that dominant piece. Giri recaptures with the knight, maintaining full central control. The d4 knight remains a powerful figure in the position. The bishop retreats all the way back to c8, a sign that black's queenside pieces are struggling to find useful activity. The bishop was contributing little on b7. Giri maneuvers the queen to d2, connecting the rooks and adding support to the d4 knight. White's pieces are working in perfect harmony. The rook activates along the b-file, seeking counterplay. Black tries to create some queenside pressure before white can convert the advantage. The rook swings to c1, controlling the c-file and preparing to contest any counterplay black might generate on that file. The queen retreats to b6. Exerting pressure on the d4 knight and b3 square, black is trying to find some friction in the position. b3 shores up the queenside pawn structure, preventing any counterplay along the b-file and giving white's position additional solidity. The bishop finally finds a more active post on d7, trying to coordinate with the rooks. Black's pieces are slowly improving, a prophylactic move, preventing any backrank issues and giving the king a little more breathing room. Giri is in no hurry. The rook joins the c-file. Doubling with the other rook and targeting the c1 rook, black maximizes the activity of all remaining pieces. The rook transfers to d1, keeping pressure on the d5 pawn and maintaining control of the central files. The rook slides to c5, active and centralized, attacking the e5 pawn directly. Black is finally generating some real counterplay. Giri steps the king to h2, a useful waiting and safety move, removing any potential backrank concerns. White can afford to be patient. Black advances the a-pawn, hoping to create a passed pawn on the queen side and give white something additional to worry about. f4 is an ambitious pawn advance from Giri, gaining space on the king side and preparing to push further. White signals that the attack is coming. Praggnanandhaa challenges white's center with f6, trying to open lines and destabilize the strong e5 pawn. A critical moment is approaching. The rook transfers to e1, reinforcing the e5 pawn before deciding how to handle black's challenge. Giri keeps his structure solid. Rook to e8 is flagged as a mistake. The rook moves to a seemingly active square, but it allows Giri to accelerate his plan in a way that black cannot handle. The engine evaluation climbs significantly here. The rook retreats to e2, doubling with the other rook and firmly defending the e-file. Giri prepares to meet any recapture on e5 with maximum pressure. Black finally captures on e5, exchanging pawns and trying to open the position. The simplification is necessary, but white retains a clear advantage. Giri recaptures with the f-pawn, restoring the e5 pawn and keeping a powerful advanced passed pawn deep in black's territory. The queen retreats to c7. Staying active and eyeing the e5 pawn, black continues to find the most stubborn defensive moves available. Both rooks now support the e-pawn. The coordination of white's pieces is impressive, and the e5 pawn is becoming a real monster. Black advances the a-pawn again, pushing toward promotion and trying to create a distraction on the queen side. This is flagged as a mistake, as it allows white to simplify in an advantageous way. Giri captures the pawn on i4, taking it off the board and transforming the structure slightly. White accepts the simplification with confidence. The bishop recaptures on i4, coming to a very active diagonal. Black is trying to create complications, but white's position remains dominant. A quiet king move to h1, stepping away from any potential checks along the second rank. Giri is in complete control and takes no chances. The queen retreats to f7, adding protection to the 8th rank and keeping options open. Black is defending resourcefully, but running out of good moves. And here it is. The e6 advance is devastating, pushing the passed pawn deep into black's position and threatening to promote. The engine evaluation surges to plus white's advantage is now overwhelming. Moving the queen to g6 is a blunder under pressure. The engine evaluation swings enormously here, and it is easy to see why. The queen moves to a square where it will soon become a problem rather than a solution, and white's attacking pieces can now coordinate for a decisive blow. The rook transfers to f2, a subtle but important move that prepares to double on the f-file or support further advances. Giri keeps tightening the grip. Rook to c4 is another mistake under extreme pressure. Black tries to generate counterplay by targeting the knight on d4, but the engine evaluation climbs dramatically. White now has a decisive advantage. The rook on f4 attacks the rook on c4, gaining tempo and keeping all of white's pieces active. A crisp Zwischenzug that maintains the initiative. h5 is a desperate attempt to create counterplay on the king side, but this allows the evaluation to jump even further in white's favor. The engine sees this as a serious mistake that accelerates the defeat. The queen comes to f2, threatening devastating checkmate ideas and combining beautifully with all of white's pieces. The evaluation climbs to nearly +3. Black is in serious trouble. Bishop to c2 is a catastrophic blunder. The evaluation explodes to nearly +4, and Praggnanandhaa's position collapses immediately. The bishop moves away from any useful defensive role and allows Giri to launch a decisive combination. e7 advances the pawn to the 7th rank, one step from promotion. This is now a completely winning move, and the evaluation confirms it at plus. The pawn is unstoppable. Bishop to e4 is black's last desperate attempt to create some counterplay, but it is a fatal mistake. The evaluation skyrockets by 9 pawns in one move. Praggnanandhaa walks into a forced sequence that Giri now executes with precision. Rook to f8 check is a brilliant forcing move, delivering check and invading the back rank simultaneously. Black must respond immediately. The king is forced to h7. Black has no better options, and the evaluation remains completely winning for white. The king is walking into danger. Giri captures the rook on e8, winning material and keeping the devastating e7 pawn alive. The combination is unraveling beautifully. Black is forced to recapture with the queen on e8, but now a stunning tactical sequence follows. The evaluation remains at over 5 pawns in white's favor. Giri captures the bishop on e4 with the rook. The engine notes this is slightly less accurate than the absolute best continuation, but the position is still completely winning. White eliminates an active piece and simplifies toward a 1 in game. Black recaptures on e4 with the pawn, and the evaluation jumps dramatically again. Despite the mass simplification, white's advanced e7 pawn and superior coordination decide the game. Queen to f5 delivers check, and with the e7 pawn still alive and black's position completely uncoordinated, Praggnanandhaa resigned here. A controlled and clinical performance from Giri. What ultimately decided this game was the unstoppable advance of White's e-pawn, pushed all the way to e7 while Black's pieces were tangled and out of play. Giri converted with precision once he established that dominant passed pawn. And a series of tactical blunders from Praggnanandhaa under time pressure allowed the combination on the back rank to finish the game convincingly. Crucial win for Giri, closing the gap slightly on the leaders while Praggnanandhaa suffers a tough defeat. Sindarov continues to set the pace and will be very difficult to catch. With several rounds still to go, the race for the candidate's title is far from over. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this game, and if you are enjoying the coverage, please subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a round.